your in that department. Tonight we'll hear from Dan Garrick, the face of the brains of behind Helical and his Bolt software. And then I'll give you an update on where we're at with Angus New Zealand and Angus Australia. And if we can just go through the process of when we've got a question, we'll just wait to the end of the presentation. And then please click on your raise hand function that you have on your Zoom to ask questions. That'd be great. First, I'd just like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the horrendous situation that has happened to one of our Angus New Zealand family members. Lindy Lawrence has been our tireless admin support at PBB for a very long time now. She's an absolute champion, and she's directly involved in the Sanderson House fire incident where she has lost her 3 beautiful grandchildren and a son-in-law. This is an incredibly tough situation for her and her family, and the rest of the PBB team that are close friends with her will also be having some challenging times. So I just ask you all, if you're dealing with PBB and whatnot, to show some patience and just appreciate the situation and what's going on up there. There was an email that went around to part of the membership from PBB, just outlining some ways of communication if you'd like to send your best wishes to Lindy. There was an email address on that email, and there was also a way of clicking on a tab for a Give Little page for her Lindy's daughter Chelsea to help out that in those situations there. So if you haven't received that email, please give me a yell, and I will be able to forward it to you if you would like to show your appreciation for Lindy there. She's a wonderful lady, and I really feel for her at this time. Right. And now I'd like to introduce Dan. He's the face and the brains behind Helical program and his Bolt software analysis engine. It's always a delight to hear some intellectual conversations with you, Dan. I don't know what was going on there, mate. But thank you very much, Dan. If I'd like to hand over to you, please.
Someone needs to maybe mute there. There we go.
I think I've managed to mute it.
Yeah.
Hopefully nice they can still hear.
Can you enable screen sharing? And thanks for the introduction, Mike.
Pleasure.
Sorry, Dan, it should be set.
Saying sharing's not turned on.
Okay. Screen.
There we go. Got it.
Got it?
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Cool. All right. So yeah, I haven't had a chance to probably introduce myself to all of you yet, or necessarily met all of you yet, but in some point in future perhaps. I guess sort of an introduction. So I actually grew up down in the Manawatu on a sheep and beef farm down there, sheep, beef and venison farm, just outside Colleton, outside Fielding, and when I was 13, my old man, who was a professor at Massey at the time, Dorian Garrick, got a job at Colorado State University, so we moved over there, and I ended up going to high school and doing both my undergraduate and PhD over in the US, both of which were in aerospace engineering. I was sort of the odd one out of my family, not doing any animal-related stuff at that point in time, but the joke's on me because I'm now doing what I'm doing. And basically how I came around to be now doing genomic stuff was in my PhD, I was doing a lot of numerical modeling, a lot of maths, a lot of programming, and a lot of the maths and programming, and particularly the numerical methods that we use in aerospace engineering are actually some of the same numerical methods we use for single-step evaluations. So basically taking all of the pedigree, performance, and genomic data and calculating breeding values There's a lot of mathematics behind that and a lot of numerical tooling that's required to um, process all of that data to generate breeding values. And so at the time I was finishing up my PhD, Dorian and a colleague of his had developed this bulk software um, and had rolled that out to a number of societies and breed societies in the US. One of the two main ones being IGS and American Hereford, and that kind of got them up and running with the company to roll out that software. And one of the first issues we ran into rolling out that software was that we needed a system and a place to store the genomic data. And so that's where Helical came to be. So the first iteration of Helical was just all around storing that SNP data. And not long after we rolled that out across our initial customers there, it got picked up by PBB and rolled out across all of the New Zealand breed societies. So the first version of that system we called Tree, but it's basically that was just the first iteration of what we now call Helical. And over time, since 2017, that system has improved, and then we rebuilt it from scratch about 5 years ago, and that's when sort of Helical came to be officially. And over time, we built on all of the breed registry parts and everything else, and got us to where we are today. So where that is specifically is, we are really the only company in the world that I'm aware of that develops in-house both of these types of products. And so you're obviously familiar with ILR2 and Breed Plan, but actually ABRI doesn't develop both of those products. They develop ILR2, but Breed Plan is actually a piece of software developed by AGBU, which is a different part of the university. So, even though ABRI are the ones who roll out both of those products, they don't actually develop both of them. And as I said, we're really the only ones in the world that I'm aware of that does develop both of these types of systems. So these are, on one side, the data system, which is where we store all of that data, the pedigree data, all of your performance data, genotype data, and then all of the results associated with it. So the EBVs and indexes and everything else. And we also develop, as I said, this bulk software, which is really the evaluation engine. So it's don't want to compare it to Breed Plan because it's a lot better, but not that I'm biased or anything, but it is effectively the same type of software underneath, in the sense that you put all of that pedigree and performance and genomic data into Bolt, and it can produce breeding values coming out the other side. So we've got thousands of breeders across more than 40 countries and across 6 species so far, who are using one or other or both of our products, or are interfacing with results through one or other of these. And what we're finding now, as we continue to grow, and we're experiencing pretty substantial demand for the data system, the Helical side of things, because there's so many organizations around the world that are really wanting to take control of their data and take control of the strategy around what they do with that data. And that in turn has led to increased demand for the Bolt side of things, where there's lots of organizations out there that have lots of data that they're not currently getting EBVs for, but they want to. And so that's sort of where I'm here talking to you today. So just to give you a bit of an idea of the extent of what we do globally. So where we are, our software is, like I said, widely used around the world already. Here's some of our, key customers in the sort of ag space, or what I would say the beef space, but also there's a little bit of horse and sheep and other things mixed in there. But predominantly, the vast majority of our business is in beef cattle space, and there's a decent chunk in the dairy cattle space as well. With our work with the Dairy New Zealand on the New Zealand Dairy Evaluation. But we also have customers in genotyping laboratories who use our systems to generate the parentage and store the SNP data internally. Many breed societies are using the system. A growing number of them are adopting, like yourselves, the complete breed registry components of it. Because again, there's really only a couple of organizations in the world that build breed registry systems, and all of the other ones, except for us, are pretty much systems like ILR2 that are very dated, not very modern, and not very flexible. and in particular can't deal with genomic data. So we're really the only ones that can really deal with the genomic data side of things. We have a growing number of universities who are using the systems to store all of their research program data, and there's a long list of countries there who are using it. But predominantly the key countries where most of our businesses would be the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK is growing very rapidly as well. So on the evaluation side of things, and what is powered by Bolt, if you like, in terms of generating breeding values, I've got the three largest public examples I can provide. So the American Hereford Association is one example. So they were really one of the first adopters. So we rolled out their single step genomic evaluation in December 2017, and that was for them. They had been promised for many years by ABRI that they would be a genomic database system ready to go for their genomic evaluation to be released. And when we got to sort of the end of November, ABRI admitted that it wasn't ready and they weren't sure when it would be ready. And so we stepped in and built out a genomic pipeline system, which was, as I said, the first iteration of Helical way back then. And getting back to the evaluation side of things, so that analysis actually incorporates data from American Hereford, Canadian Hereford, Argentinian Hereford, and the Uruguayan Hereford Association. So it's a 4-country analysis, and I'll cover what traits are covered in that analysis in a second. And then the next analysis there would be the IGS one. So that's the largest beef multi-breed evaluation in the world. There's more than 20 breed societies. I think they're up to maybe 25 or 26 now, contributing data to that analysis. There's more than 20 million animals in that analysis, and more than 700,000 of them are genotyped. But it is different from the Hereford analysis. So the Hereford is a purebred analysis just for Hereford cattle. IGS is a multi-breed analysis, so it actually can analyze animals across many different breeds and can provide accurate comparisons of animals between breeds. And then finally, the last one is the New Zealand multi-breed dairy evaluation. So that's the national dairy evaluation system, which is run through NZAEL, which is a subsidiary of Dairy New Zealand. And that analyzes the complete dairy herd database, which has more than 36 million animals in it, and about 70,000 genotyped individuals at the moment. And then that produces breeding values on more than 30 traits. And then there's another set of traits which incorporate all of the data from the bobby calves for calving difficulty and gestation length. And that has a much larger pedigree of about 63 million animals that gets analysed there. And obviously those traits would be of interest for some of the things that are happening in the dairy beef space. So just to cover a little bit more about the Hereford evaluation, it's actually referred to as the PACE evaluation because it is across the Pan-American countries. CLE evaluation incorporating data from those 4 countries, as I said. And one of the things we worked on last year with the American Hereford Association, which I presented in Kansas City about 3 weeks ago at the World Hereford Conference, was a trial analysis of that evaluation, which incorporated the additional data from the New Zealand and Australian Hereford societies into that analysis. So it became a 6-country evaluation system, just to assess how all those results looked, because both New Zealand and Australia were interested in what that would look like, and presented the results of that, and everything was looking really good there. So the EPDs in US jargon, or EBVs in the rest of the world, that we deliver through that PACE evaluation are all listed here. So these are all sort of the traits that you'd be largely familiar with. Some of them are called slightly different. They refer to sort of birth, weaning, and yearling weight rather than birth 200 day and 400 days, 600 days, so on. But fundamentally, all of these traits are the same types of traits that are or very similar definitions to the traits that are delivered by breed plan. So those are all traits that we are capable of delivering through Bolt. And just wanted to cover a little bit here, sort of to give you an idea of the data flows and how all this looks for Angus New Zealand in particular with this move to helical. So we've got up the top here the genotyping laboratories. So at the moment, Neogen and Zoetis are feeding data that are on animals that are tested by Angus New Zealand members, and that's going into helical, and that has been going into helical for many, many years, because that is something that, as I said, PBB has been using it for a long time for the parentage piece and the genomic data storage piece, long before Angus New Zealand actually adopted it for the complete registry system. But now that we have migrated, or you have migrated to use the system, that means that the farmers yourselves are now submitting your performance data and your pedigree data directly into helical, and the results are being returned back to you through that same interface. And to facilitate the breed plan, the Trans-Tasman breed plan analyses, we generate an extract of all of the Angus New Zealand data, and we provide that to ABRI, and they incorporate that with the Angus Australian data to run the Trans-Tasman breed plan analysis, and then ABRI returns those EPVs back to us to load back into the system. So that's the sort of the current situation. And soon there is this new genomic testing provider that's going to be available to you through Weatherby's, or maybe it already is, through Weatherby's Scientifics, which will, is providing a bit more competition into the market in terms of DNA testing options. And so that will just slot in right there, or already has, so that, any breeders who choose to test through Weatherby Scientific, that data will just similarly flow into helical and, be incorporated in all of these aspects. The other part that we've been working on is this integration with Gallagher. So that's really designed to reduce the amount of manual entry of data, so that anyone who's utilizing Gallagher equipment and has the Gallagher web access, when that data syncs to the Gallagher account, it means that there'll be a new option in Helical to allow you to link your Gallagher account with your Helical account, and then you'll be able to select the weigh sessions and any other data that was collected on those Gallagher scales, and pull that straight through to Helical without having to manually enter any of it. So the other potential piece here now, and in terms of what we're talking about with a potential body condition score EBV initially, but there's many other possibilities in terms of EBVs that we could deliver to Angus New Zealand, and all that would look like is basically there would be an additional set of extracts on those traits that you are interested in us running for you, and those would likewise be extracted out of the helical database we're running for you, and we would analyze that with our Bolt software, and we would deliver those EPVs back to be loaded into helical alongside the breed plan EPVs, so they would be able to complement whatever existing EPVs you are getting, but we would be able to introduce various new EPVs that are specific to you and of interest to you. Now, some of the other things that we can enable through helical is the opportunities for data sharing, where I guess I should say where the other organisations are willing to share that data with you or incorporate that data in a joint analysis, and that is definitely the landscape and the politics is changing there quite rapidly. As organisations build their own data strategies and consolidating their data in various ways, which is creating some of the friction in certain sense, where data is able to be shared more easily, but for various reasons people aren't always sharing data. So that's going to continue to be a challenge, but certainly from a technical aspect of the data platform and what Helical can provide, we can certainly enable your data to get to where it needs to be to facilitate any kinds of opportunities like joint evaluations with American Angus or any others. Now, another opportunity that exists, which is not something that's sort of widely maybe talked about in New Zealand as much as other countries. Certainly in New Zealand, is some use of the Neogen identity tests, and then there's also Zoetis sort of inherit scores and things like that, but they are probably not as widely adopted as we see in some of the other countries. And one of the things that we can offer through both Helical and Bolt is actually a much more New Zealand centric and Angus centric commercial product. So if we were to facilitate evaluations, we would have the reference population from the data set that you have to facilitate a set of trait scores, for example, across any of the EBVs that would be of interest to commercial producers, which would enable them to genotype all of their animals, get trait scores that are specific and specific to the New Zealand context and the Angus New Zealand context, and use that to rank their animals. That's something that we can enable with the tools that we have. And just to give an example of where this is operating, we aren't running the evaluations in this particular case, but we could. But we are providing the results of this heifer select project through Helical. So that is a commercial tool that has been rolled out through collaboration between the Canadian Angus, Hereford, and Charolais associations, and it's designed for the commercial breeders in Canada to be able to test their animals and use those results to select their heifers for various replacement traits that they're interested in across growth, fertility, and carcass traits. And they also get back parent verification, and they get back breed composition estimates, and that's all being delivered back to all those producers in Helical. And there's opportunities for them to submit phenotype data on all of those animals into the system so that they can continue to grow the reference population, which is what we need. When we say reference population, that's the population of animals who we have both phenotype data, performance data, and genotype data on. And that's what drives these types of products. We need to continue to collect that performance data to enable these predictions to be accurate. And that can all be facilitated through the tools we can provide. So I guess the question for you all, something to think about, is what does a New Zealand prioritized solution look like? And I think that's something that is I imagine top of mind for you all. I'm sure everyone has their own opinion about what the number one priority should be, but I think probably one of the biggest points I'd leave you with is just around one of the challenges if there was to be a big exodus of New Zealand breeders to do more things directly with Australian societies, and we would lose the critical mass of memberships within the New Zealand societies. One of the drawbacks that would come for that is that there would be a lot less focus on what a New Zealand prioritized solution should be, because we would no longer be able to be in the driver's seat if all of that data is going offshore. Okay, that's me.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate your input there. I mean, it's been a huge body of work to get all the data across into Helical, and I'd like to thank all those that have been involved in that. It's been quite a process, and we're pretty excited where we're at now and the opportunities that are now opened up to us, both globally and through the commercial industry as well. So, and it's always great to hear how large a scale that your organisation's grown to and the amount of animals that you're dealing with. I mean, just take the New Zealand dairy industry there. It's a lot of data coming fed back in, so that's awesome. So we'll just have some question time for Dan now. If anyone's got a question, if you can just use your hand tab on your Zoom, and you should crop up and we'll be able to enable you to speak. Well, I had a question, Dan, just well, we're waiting for someone to put their hand up. Just how often were you running the analysis? I think we touched on that last time, but I just can't remember, sorry.
Yep. So for the American Hereford and IGS analyses, those are both weekly analyses. So every single week, there's a new set of EBVs coming out with all the latest data.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And are you also looking at having a chat with the TrueTest guys rather for the data input as well as the Gallagher team?
Yeah. So we've got a number of plans on the roadmap around making all of the data collection easier. And True Test is definitely on the radar. We've had some initial discussions with them, and yeah, I expect that we will eventually be able to get an integration going with them as well. But there's lots of other opportunities as well, outside of just those two that we've keeping an eye on. We also think there's big opportunities with Halter. There's a growing number of beef breeders using Halter, and I think there's some really valuable data that's been collected through those collars for particularly for some fertility traits and things like that. So we've had some again initial discussions with them, but it's all of those are collaborative efforts, so not necessarily things that we can get done as quickly as we would like.
Cool. Have we got any questions there, team?
I have, sorry, Mike, but I can't find my hand tab.
All right, no problem. Fire away, man.
Just a quick one, Dan, something I'm constantly asked. Genomic weightings on EBVs, who decides and how do they decide?
Well, I guess I can only speak for us, but generally speaking, there's not a decision necessarily that's made there. It's the data that decides for us. When we run the analyses, there's various tests that we do, which allows us to look at what is an appropriate weighting, and if we can assess if the weighting is too high or too low. But ultimately, it is the data that is telling us what that weighting should be. So it depends on the trait. For some traits, we're able to have a higher weighting because more of the trait is explained by the DNA piece. And then there's other traits where the DNA explains less of the trait.
So what would be your typical then? Because there's a lot of talk, people say 90 to 95% of most EBVs is weighted by the genomics. Is that correct, or is it miles out? What's sort of the normal?
Well, I can't speak for what BreedPlan does, but in terms of the analysis we run, I'd say our starting point is typically 50-50 or 60-40. So that's usually where we start the analysis, and then we run various what we call validation exercises, where we test to see if that weighting is giving us a good prediction or not. And if it's not, then we can adjust it. And there's various other tests we can do to assess, where the weighting should sit. But as I said, it's typically around 50-50 to start with anyway.
When you say 50-50, so that's because I was sort of thinking three-way as far as pedigree, performance, genomic.
So what that means is of the genetic variation, half of it is explained by the DNA, and the other half is explained by something genetic in the pedigree, but it's not captured by the DNA. So when we put that DNA piece in there, that's only able to explain half of that genetic variation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't find that tab either. So I'll have a fire up the question, can I?
Go for it, David.
Yeah, so it seems to me that ABRI is the ones dragging the chain here on this whole thing. And is it possible that Bolt or Helical can do the job that ABRI is doing? I mean, this business having to wait a month to get our data back is like 50 years ago. We're just doing our Ramsale catalogue here at the moment. As long as we've got our data on Friday afternoon, we've got it back on Monday morning. And having to wait a month for the Angus, and like what happened 2 months ago where we didn't get it back at all, that was another month. Is that ABRI's problem, or is it something you guys can do something about?
Yeah, well, the frequency at which they return the results back to you, that's I suppose between ABRI and Angus New Zealand. All of the evaluations we run, like I said, we do it on we tend to do it on a weekly basis. So it means, week in, week out, you'd get new results. So that's definitely something we could provide for you on the traits that we can analyze with just your data. I think the piece that ABRI provides at this stage is around that trans-Tasman, that joint trans-Tasman analysis. Yeah.
No, I'd probably add.
So what you're saying, is it possible that Bolt can do what ABRI is doing and we don't need ABRI at all?
I mean, yes, we can definitely do everything API can do, and we
Yeah.
can do it a lot faster.
Yeah.
The only piece, like I said, the only piece at this stage that they have the connections with Angus Australia to facilitate their data going into that joint Trans-Tasman analysis. But we could certainly run a weekly analysis with just all of the Angus New Zealand data. Reasonably quickly, we could get that up and running.
I think, David, I can just add there that this is the part of the reason we went to Helicord was to create some other opportunity with analysis, because the feedback we were getting from members was everyone was getting a bit frustrated with ABRI system, and so that's when we started exploring other opportunities, and we ended up signing up with Dan and to get ourselves into Helicord and be able to utilise the likes of a Bolt to do analysis. So that opportunity is now there that we have. We're underway with Helical. Does that sort of cover your question, David?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, like with the sheep, we can get an in-herd evaluation or an in-flock evaluation done overnight, and if we want to get the New Zealand one done, it's over the weekend. So, if you added a few more bits of data or you found a couple of rams that didn't have the DNA on or something, you can just get it run overnight and you're away. So that's where we want to be with this Angus job too, because you're getting held up with a whole lot of stuff and having to just do deadlines and
and so we've got these. This is why we're excited about the opportunities that open up now, really. So have you got a question there?
Yes, I do. I was saying, I actually put it in the chat because I thought that might be easier. But what is the cost structure, and is this going to increase? How's this geared so that we know what we're dealing with? Is it going to cost us more than what we're doing now?
Do you want me to answer that, Mike?
Jane, you'd be more qualified than me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go back one, David, to your question there. So you've got to remember here that Helical are the IRL2 platform, and the breed plan evaluation is still done with the Trans-Tasman evaluation, which we get once a month. Should we choose to move that entire evaluation through to Bolt, then you could get that evaluation done weekly for the New Zealand clientele here. So, we've transitioned all of your data through into Helical, which has been a massive job. We're ready to make that data agile wherever we may wish to go in the future, and that could be through into a world evaluation should we wish, or the members wish to do that. But currently we're sitting with Dan. Should we choose to go and utilise that Bolt system to evaluate totally, we would look to do that in the future. He will do the body condition score, hip height, and do our structure for us in the interim. And we've got a meeting on Thursday in and around the time frame for that. But it looks like we'll have those three EBVs up and running for you by the beginning of next year. And to answer your question, Sue, our meeting on Friday with Dan will also confirm the pricing structure for this.
I would have thought that would have been quite a requirement to even approach them, that you would have to have some idea of the cost structure that you could advise the members.
We've got the cost structure for moving. It's just the 3 new EBVs, so.
And so are you more referring, Sue, to if we were to take our whole evaluation over to Bolt, are you talking about that comparison?
Yeah, as against ABRI.
Yeah, as against ABRI. Yeah.
Yeah. So we haven't progressed to that point. So we're just looking at the new EBVs through Bolt, and the evaluation still is being done by ABRI of the main traits.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess all I would say is, we could run the whole evaluation, and it definitely wouldn't be any more than what you're paying ABRI for the whole evaluation.
There's your sales pitch, Stan.
Yeah.
But I think this is now where we've got the opportunity, right? And so we've worked ourselves into a situation here now that we have options, and we can choose that path if everyone's aligned. So
the difference would be a weekly evaluation, not monthly. And certainly, if there was interest in within herd evaluations that ran nightly, would be quite happy to talk to you about that as well. That wouldn't be a problem.
Thanks, Dan. Stu, have you got another one, or is that?
Yes, I have got another question.
Good on you.
Yep. Will that not disadvantage us if our EBVs are generated from a much smaller population with Angus New Zealand instead of TACE?
Yes, it would be a smaller data pool. Correct.
Would that not be disadvantageous?
It depends on a number of factors. I'd say it would depend on the extent of the performance recording on the various traits and how much of that is being contributed by Angus Australia data. I would say if there are traits of relevance to New Zealand breeders specifically, then the best thing that New Zealand breeders could be doing is to performance record on those traits in particular. And, you know, that's going to give you the best bang for your buck, regardless of whether you're joining the, whether you're in Trans-Tasman or out of Trans-Tasman. It's going to be better to have, you know, New Zealand data contributing to those EBVs. So, without looking at the there's an exercise that we go through relating to validating the EBVs from predictions, which are the types of things we would look at to assess, you know, whether there would be a disadvantage or an advantage about, you know, pulling that data together from that level. I think one of the I think so long as there's a broad spectrum of performance data coming in on New Zealand animals, I don't think there would necessarily be a disadvantage from the predictive power point of view. I would expect, you know, particularly for things like growth traits, I would imagine that there's enough New Zealand data on growth traits, as an example. Most likely some of the other traits as well, where the predictions on New Zealand animals would not be, you know, any better or worse off. The sort of the key piece, I suppose, that you would miss out on by not being part of the Trans-Tasman evaluation would just be around the comparison of Angus sires or Angus bulls who don't have any performance recorded progeny in New Zealand. But the benefit of the genomic evaluation is that, you know, if there's a genotype and if those animals get brought in and they're genomically tested, then they would get a, you know, reasonable prediction just from the incorporation of their genotype data.
Okay.
Until they can get progeny on the ground in New Zealand and data recorded on them.
Yeah, I sort of think I get that. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Mike, just a question there, really. At a time when the theme seems to be more of international collaboration with data, and IGS is huge, and it's impressive what Dan's done there. We're tending to drift away, and I like the idea of the collaborative EBV with Australia is of some value. We risk becoming an orphan and not being able to compare ourselves with Australia directly. And whilst we can produce EBVs, Dan can produce an EBV on probably a very small data set, the accuracy of it will be inevitably compromised compared to a greater database. So those are my concerns with, and it may be that we end up drifting back together again. I don't know, but the drift at the moment is that we're sort of heading away on our own.
Well, Dan, when you get Angus Australia signed up, and then we'll be able to evaluate the whole thing under Bolt, that'd be really helpful. So,
yeah,
crack on with your negotiations over there.
Yeah.
I think taking your point there, James, I think it's more a point than a question.
Can I just add something, Mike? So, I mean, the whole point of moving to helical is that our data is in a modern, fast, integrated system, and it could be that our members say, let's go IGS and just join into IGS, or let's join it with the World Angus evaluation. We have got the ability to do that. At the moment, we are using TACE still to keep the Trans-Tasman evaluation live. That's my understanding, yes. And as Mike presented, and will probably allude to later, the ability to have combined Australian EBVs is reliant on Australia cooperating. And I'll leave Mark to talk about that. But I mean, we can bang on their door as much as we like, but if they say no, go away, that's as much as we can do, to be fair. So our members want body condition score and they want structural EBVs, and we've got Dan on our doorstep who can provide both. And that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, very good. Yeah, and that's exactly what the process we're doing with Dan is getting these body conditions and hip height and structural EBVs up and running, and it's great that we're going to be able to have them pretty sharp, Dan, early in the new year, or if you manage to find someone to work a couple of weekends, then it might be before that, is it? Paul, have you got your hand there again, mate?
Yeah, I have, Mike. No, I just pretty much James stole my thunder. So I was just, I guess, reiterating what James said. I think it is extremely important, even in the short term, if for a year or two, we were to suddenly not have that international or just the Australian base to compare, the genetics that would potentially be lost by not coming into New Zealand is quite massive. Like the ramifications of something like that are huge. What James said is very, 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 very accurate and quite strong. We need to make sure that we have access to every database possible and not limit ourselves.
Yeah, and so you can see why we've ended up the situation where we are now, that we're still hooked in with the TACE evaluation, and yes, we're still unfortunately governed by ABRI a little bit there.
Can I ask, how long is that TACE contract in place for? Like, what is to say the Australians can't back out tomorrow and say we're no longer part of Trans-Tasman?
Well, and part of the conversations that we had with them, that they were committed to still taking that through to. Jane, can you just remind me of the time frame? That was at the end of next year or something?
Correct. I guess, Paul, for your greater, and James, for your greater concerns, I hear what you're saying, but is our option to look further afield and actually become involved with the world evaluation? So the agility that we now have with Helical, moving forward, that could be an option, longer term.
Absolutely longer term, but I mean, if we're talking 3 to 5 years of missing out on comparative data, it's massive in the grand scheme.
Yeah.
I think the situation we're in with Helical, we've got options, right, Paul? So whereas before we didn't have any options, we were all tied in with ABRI, lock, stock, and barrel. Whereas now we're in a situation where we have opportunity.
So sorry, just go back. How long did you say that the contract is in place for TACE?
Don't quote me, but I think it's just the end of next year, end of 2026.
So the reality is, if for whatever reason Australia said, sorry, we no longer want to be part of TACE, by the end of 2026, we would be out on our own.
Well, not necessarily, because now that we're with Helical, we could integrate into all sorts of other evaluation systems. So,
but the reality is, Mike, that genetic comparative for the New Zealand population is mostly linked with Australia, not the rest of the world.
That's because we're in you mean because we're in the TACE evaluation there?
No, I mean the actual genetics that are used. So, like when you're talking about comparative data, that we've got all our linkages, the vast majority are with Australian animals, not anywhere else in the world. Yes, we've got some American, but our strongest link to a big database is with Australia and spread out across the Australian divide with the genetics, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, like I don't know the stats on that, Paul, but do you know the stats on that as to the linkages out of Australia versus out of the US, for argument's sake?
I wouldn't have a clue off the top of my head, but it doesn't take an Einstein to work out when you look at pedigrees and stuff throughout New Zealand. And when you look at a percentage versus Australia versus, say, the American population, how strongly linked we are just naturally to Australia compared to anywhere else. That's what I'm saying. Like, if we lose that linkage, it would be so detrimental to us.
Yeah, and so like that's just the situation we're in at the moment, right? And clearly it's not happening tomorrow. So it provides opportunity to look at, and see where we're going to end up. Like, I think the conversations that we've had with Angus Australia, and I can allude to later, that there was mutual benefit in the TACE evaluation as it stands at the moment, and hence why there was a genuine commitment to stay there till the end of the contract time. I just can't remember the contract time that Angus Australia had. Sorry, it's not sticking with me, but
Yeah, that's right.
it might have been longer than ours, but I just can't remember that. Sorry.
Dan, question for you. If, and this is theoretical, but if you were running Australia and New Zealand together, can you produce you'd be able to produce a New Zealand EBV for whatever trait we might particularly like, and using our database, our geographic database, because I think maybe Mike was alluding to that we would lose our ability to produce our own EBVs if we stayed with Australia. But I don't see that as necessarily the case. Is that fair?
Well, I think one of the things at least I was probably alluding to, I suppose, is, let's just say hypothetically, Angus Australia pulled out a TACE the end of 2026, and they came to all the New Zealand breeders and they said, you can continue in TACE so long as you join Angus Australia. I think that's one of the hypotheticals that you could be looking at. And if there was a mass exodus of New Zealand breeders to join that new paradigm, which is hypothetical, then that would be very detrimental, I think, to the New Zealand beef industry as a whole, in terms of being able to drive, what is the priority for New Zealand producers, because you'd really be sitting in the back seat of the car that Angus Australia is driving, and you'd be, just taken wherever they're going. So I think that's probably one of the biggest risks I see. As far as, being able to deliver any sets of EBVs that, New Zealand breeders are interested in, where there is a lot of New Zealand data being collected on New Zealand animals, then that's definitely an opportunity that we can leverage, the data being in Helical, and we can facilitate delivery of some of these other EBVs that maybe Angus Australia or any other party is offering, and they are of interest to New Zealand breeders. So, there could be other traits that may be of interest to New Zealand breeders that none of those other parties even offer, and we could deliver that to you. So that is, I guess, another benefit about, some of the things we can provide. I would say on that linkage piece, around the, Australian animals, so long as any Australian animals who have progeny in New Zealand, they will be in the Angus New Zealand database already. So the ones which, there'll still be comparisons with those animals, even if, semen is imported and those animals are not physically on the ground here, they would still be represented in the Angus New Zealand database, and they would still get EBVs, and there would be comparisons with them. The difference would be simply that the Australian data would not be included in those predictions. So the accuracy of those sires may not be as good, but if they've got a number of progeny in New Zealand and they're genomically tested, then they would still have, I would guess, for most traits, a pretty good prediction. And the benefit of the genomic evaluation means that if there are any new sires, and predominantly, for the maximum genetic gain, you would be using the youngest bull calves, unproven bulls each generation. That's just theoretically, having the lowest generation interval means using genomically tested, unproven bull calves who are, ranked highly on different traits. Then, that is kind of the same situation, regardless of whether they're Australian animals or New Zealand animals, in the sense that they're not going to have progeny in Australia yet either. But if you are able to genotype those animals and put that genotype into the Angus New Zealand database, then you would immediately get the same level of prediction for and comparison of that animal against New Zealand animals as you would, in the TACE analysis. So I think there is definitely value in the Angus Australia data. I'm not going to say that there's not, but I think I just want to be clear that there is still various ways that those genetic linkages are still sitting in there, and you are still going to get comparisons across those animals, and there are ways to still continue to import animals and have those become part of the analysis and be compared. They're just not going to have that additional Australian data. But as was kind of mentioned, there's two parties that are required to collaborate, and if one of the parties isn't willing to, then that's a challenge.
Does that kind of answer your question, Paul?
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yep. Have we got any other hands up there, team? Or if you can't find your hand button, just speak up.
There's no hand button up at this stage. Oh, one's just gone up. A question.
Yeah, found it.
Just a question for you, Dan. So do you know if Bolt uses the same or similar algorithms to compile a new trait such as body condition score, so that it's like comparable with the Australian one?
Well, you wouldn't, you can't compare EBVs from two different systems. Yeah, I mean, yes, it uses a similar algorithm in terms of generating those EBVs, but you couldn't take EBVs on something like body condition score, which would be produced with just your data, and compare that to body condition score EBVs from any other system. You can't compare animals like that, unfortunately.
Is that around because it's been isolated out of one data set, Dan?
Because they're on different bases. So what's important with EBVs is actually not the sort of absolute value of an EBV for an animal. What's important is the differences between animals and how they rank against each other. And different evaluation systems, they've got different base populations that are driving those predictions, and so the EBVs are all relative to that base. So they're not able to be compared like that.
Does that answer your question there, Anna? Have you got another one there, Anna, or is your hand still just swinging up there? Nah, cool. Anyone else?
Oh yeah, I'll have another go if I may.
Yeah, go for it.
So Daniel, it just seems to me that Angus Australia have frustrations with ABRI as well, and that seems to be quite well known. So why don't you sell your system to Angus Australia? I don't think it'd be that hard to sell by the sound of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're trying to sell our system to everyone who is in this space. I mean, as you probably saw on the slide, there's a huge number of breed societies that are already using it, and we are growing very rapidly. So more and more and more are adopting it every day. So yeah, I can't say much more than that.
Is that a possibility? Is that conversation being had at the moment?
Oh, we're definitely talking to Angus Australia. Yeah, definitely talking to them. I mean, I don't know that there's anybody that's not frustrated with ABRI, and has been for a long time. So we're definitely talking to everyone about all the opportunities we can provide, and the data sovereignty, the ability to drive their own data strategy. We're having that conversation with pretty much every beef breed society in the world, just about, certainly in the OECD. So it's. Yeah, there's lots of opportunities. I think that the other big one, I think that's maybe not talked about enough in New Zealand, but it's really massive in the US right now. And part of this is just driven by, there not being meat grading standards in New Zealand. But in the US right now, obviously the beef prices are kind of out of control. On some level, there's all kinds of reasons for that. But one of the things that is interesting over there is the difference between what's called a prime graded cattle and a choice graded cattle is $800 premium per head. for those animals going to the supermarkets. And so one of the things so as a result, that's really driving a huge amount of investment into, at the moment, basically the only way they can tell which animals are going to be prime or choice is after the fact, after they've been through the meat processor and they've been graded that way. And one of the things that genomic prediction can unlock is if all of those animals, which are predominantly dairy beef animals now, so they're Holstein Angus, majority of them, they're all getting genotyped at basically right after birth at the calf nursery, so that when they get to the point where they're going to be weaned, they actually get sorted using the predictions of those marbling traits, and we can have a greater degree of certainty about which animals are going to go on to be prime animals and which ones are not. And obviously, an $800 premium can easily justify a $20 to $30 genomic test to unlock that kind of thing. And if there was a amount of commercial carcass data in New Zealand and grading standards on carcass data that we were able to incorporate into Helical, which is all something that Helical's capable of doing, those are the types of predictions that we could, definitely unlock for New Zealand beef producers, so that they could genomically test their animals as early as possible, so they have the maximum amount of time to use that information to decide what they should do with those animals to, feed them out or to, get rid of them early. So there's huge opportunities there, and it's something I'd be, we're very keen to facilitate, as much of those types of capabilities as we can, and in particular enable all of the data collection to facilitate predictions like that, to really drive a lot more value to, everything that farmers are doing.
Yeah, that's awesome, thanks, Dan. It's such an issue that we're lacking in this country, and the discussions are constantly being held about how we could gain that sort of information from the processes. Anyone else with a question? No, that looks like we might be there, Dan. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate your insights there. It's great to be able to have that sort of informal chat and everyone be able to share some questions and get some feedback from you. Again, just reiterate how impressive that the Helical and the system is, and hoping everyone's getting a handle on how they're using it now and getting familiar with the system. And like what I love about it is you get a question from someone that comes in and said, "Oh, can we add this in?" And you guys are so responsive, and by putting in things that are easier to load our data in. So just stoked with what you're doing there, eh? It's great, and great to have you on board. So thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And yeah, keep the feedback coming. I mean, all of the feedback we get from the breeders about things we should be doing, things we should change, things they don't like. We take all of that on board, and we work really hard to try and address all of that stuff to make it as easy as possible to use, and deliver as much value as we possibly can to you all. So we appreciate your trust and putting all your data in there with us.
That's cool. I'll just add one more thing just before you head away, Dan. Just if people are loading in data with Helical and they have any issues with, or you have a bright idea of how it could be better, just get in touch with the registry team, and they'll pass it on to Dan. And it's great having people use it, and you're coming up with different ideas from different people of how we can be better at it. So just keep that feedback coming. That'd be great. Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you. Catch up.
See ya.
Thanks, Dan.
Cheers, Dan.
Well, guys, I just thought that he's such a good guy to be able to ask questions. It's great to get some live sort of commentary there. I just thought I'd just now run through just where we're up to with Angus Australia and how that all sort of played out. So just to for everyone, just to give you some updates on that. I thought this would be a good opportunity to be able to do that. So just to go back in a bit of travel back in time a wee bit, there was a member mandate just to explore a closer collaboration with Angus Australia across the youth and the education and evaluations and R&D. So we started this process back in 2022 with initial face-to-face meeting with the president at the time was Sam White, and Scott Wright had just started in his role as the CEO over there. It was one would say maybe a little bit frosty, and just wondering. No, I guess they were just wondering about where we were coming from, and so we just had a bit of a fleshing out patch there, and started building relationships. We ended up out for dinner that night, and it sort of softened things up a bit. So that was really good. And then it sort of went through. We went through a couple of presidents there as that went on, and then we just got in a bit more detail into 24. We had a meeting over in Brisbane with the then president was Sinclair Munro. So that was a good sort of catch up with an introduction to his way of thinking. So that was really about trying to build the relationships and making sure that we're aligned on data integrity and genomics and Angus Youth R&D education. So we were really on the same page with all that stuff, which was great. Clearly, there's a challenge with the genomics companies giving commercial farmers data. So we shared our thoughts and really aligned on all four of those issues. So that was great. But they were really after a sort of a full collaboration at that point, and they really wanted to launch it at the what's the word? They wanted to sort of fast track, I guess you'd say. So we had another meeting. We explored some options in the value proposition of Angus New Zealand, and they were really wanting to try and launch something off, I guess, at the World Forum, and that was pretty soon after that meeting. So we ended up saying, "Hey, look, fellas, sorry, but this is a bit rapid. There's no way we're going to get around the membership and get anything back to you." So that time frame's not really applicable for us. So that passed, and they had their hands tied up with the World Forum. So we agreed to just touch base again afterwards. So we did that in August 2025, and we had a good catch up there on the Zoom meeting. But really, that came down to a point where they were saying, well, it's full collaboration or nothing. And by the way, if you think Angus New Zealand's got some value, send us a proposition around the Angus New Zealand's value to Angus Australia. We communicated with them then about wanting to share the body condition score data and the hip height cow data with Angus Australia. They were reasonably open to that idea, but they wanted to check with their New Zealand members to make sure that they were going to be okay with that. We got some feedback from them post that meeting, and that answer was a no. That wasn't going to be an option for us. So we've sent back a formal letter on the 15th of October saying, just outlining Angus New Zealand's position on collaboration is definitely a yes, amalgamation is no, but the door is still open to explore future opportunities should things change in the near or longer term. So I'll just run through a wee bit where we got to, and happy to answer questions at the end of this too, guys. So the Angus New Zealand board position was with the no. I'll just elaborate on that a little bit. So after the August meeting, the Angus New Zealand board resolved that a full amalgamation was not in the best interest of its members at the time. The reasons were the loss of autonomy. So the brand, the governance, the member services were transferred to Angus Australia, and Angus New Zealand would be more like a state-like entity. Implications for the medium term and the long term impact. I think Dan sort of touched on a few of those. There's a single board seat offered at the table that is currently filled by Ben Todhunter. So there'll be no sort of meaningful influence over there. We just tried to explore the opportunity of a dual membership or a hybrid model. Angus Australia, we're insisting on that all the Angus New Zealand members become full breeding members of Angus Australia. And so then there'll be a small group among 4,000 breeders over there. Strategic initiatives are underway here. Clearly, what we've been through with Helical tonight, you can see where we've been up to with that integration, and our body condition score and our hip height cow EBVs are underway. R&D partnerships with beef and lamb genetics and the government, brand and licensing negotiations, youth development with the Generation Angus, no ball weekends. I'd like to probably to follow on from that. Angus Australia, we're very keen to share info and collaborate on the youth development, and there still are. Financial independence and IP protection, so the brand assets, the data, the licensing revenue would all be jeopardised, and the governance and the cultural fit. The shared interests and the opportunities that we still have with Angus Australia are around the like. I feel like we've got a pretty strong commitment here with this active cooperation in the youth development. So joint leadership pathways, exchange programs back and forth across the Tasman. That has actually been underway. There's already been a couple of visits across the Tasman there, which is great. Data security and genomic accuracy, addressing the commercial genomics companies' influence. The industry representation, the joint presence at global Angus forums and harmonised communications where beneficial. And then it's just Angus New Zealand remains open to re-examining amalgamations if circumstances materially change and if proposal aligns with member interests and autonomy. At the Ward Chairs meeting that we had recently up in Palmy, there was a bit of feedback and discussions there and some reactions. So communication and transparency was a massive one. The Ward Chairs expressed their frustration at limited information that had been shared earlier due to the non-disclosure agreement. So, well, I missed that one out. That's we ended up signing a non-disclosure agreement with Angus Australia because we're starting to talk around some sort of reasonably serious numbers and costings and some sensitive sort of stuff there. So that's when we signed an NDA with them, so that we're sharing that around before we were ready to have a release. The independence and integration, the board agreement that Angus New Zealand's independent platform Helical has its agility to make full amalgamation unnecessary. Recognition that while Australian offers horsepower, scale, resources, and analytics, New Zealand punches well above its weight and can now deliver comparable EBV outputs locally. This, combined with a loss to medium and long-term autonomy, contributed to the decision at this time. Several chairs commented, "Why jump the fence when we can get better at what we are doing already at home?" The risks that were identified, the membership fragmentation, I think we touched on that with Dan there, and how the impact that can impact. The EBV comparability. So that's talking about, Dan touched, he sort of covered that one off with the different data evaluations. The perception management, the narrative must emphasise the partnership, not the conflict. The future direction options that we have now in our hands is the referendum proposal. That was a non-binding vote to determine whether the membership wants further investigation into Angus Australia. This would require 75% support to proceed, and simply authorises further exploration, not necessarily amalgamation. And the status quo path is the other option, is to pause negotiations for the moment, focus on executing New Zealand-based solutions and building collaboration through practical projects. So we've got that with those new EVs underway, and the bedding in with Helical and everyone getting used to that program is the path where we're at the moment. And the sentiment from the room was leaning towards option 2, was the consolidation and the communication first and revisit later if needed. So we're constantly trying to work on how we can communicate better. I think that's a challenge for both us and the wards, and we're open to some feedback on how we can do that better. The governance and the legal considerations. Well, obviously there was the NDA obligations, and so we had to sort of make sure that was abided by. We had a bit of legal advice on that, making sure we could cover off what we needed to there. The members noted that Angus New Zealand's incorporation assets and licensing rights are held under New Zealand law, and so would need to be careful where that ended up there. The board reflections and the closing discussion. The chair summarised, we can get EBVs through Helical with weekly group runs. Let's prove that before we start talking mergers, because there's clearly an option there that Angus Australia have with Helical, and it'll be interesting to see how they view us jumping on board with Helical and us having the we're not in the test run case, but clearly they're well established. But it'll be interesting to see their feedback from our experiences there. The recognition that communication with the wards must be more frequent and transparent, and the suggestions included twice yearly ward chair meetings, ward level summaries after each board meeting, greater clarity on how feedback loops operate. And the consensus was leave the door open with Angus Australia, but stay focused on strengthening New Zealand's capability. And then we came out with some immediate actions, was prepare the briefing note, confirm our legal standing on the NDA, develop a new communication plan, and decide on whether to initiate the non-binding referendum. So that's the summary of where we were at with Angus Australia and the ward chairs meeting. I went through that reasonably quickly, so I'm not keeping everyone all night. But where are we at? Is there anyone with some questions that would like me to elaborate on any of that? Or shall I throw, just if I missed anything out there? Paul, did you have a question? No, you just popped up on the screen. You must be making lots of noise, mate. So I think tonight, the purpose of tonight really is to get everyone across where Helical is at and how wide the door is open with Helical and the opportunities that provides. And it'll be really interesting to see where he gets to with Angus Australia. Because clearly there's a lot of movement in this space at the moment. It's right throughout the world, and people aren't just putting up with the likes of an ABRI now for just because it's the only option. And it's great to have someone like Dan on board that can really communicate with us well. Sue, have you got a question there?
Yeah, I did. So at this stage, you're not going ahead with the referendum. Is that what I understood from your?
Yeah, so the feedback was that where we got to with it was that we'll get the runs on the board with getting Helical and these EBVs up and running, and more than happy to go back and reassess that once we get these EBVs up and running and how everyone finds that situation folding, and if that's truly beneficial, which is where we think it's going to be at.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a timeline on that, Mike?
Yeah, I think they're going to have them up and running in, well, he's saying early in the new year, but I think he was, we're trying to just probe that along a little bit, and but I think it'll be very early in the new year.
So, Paul, I'll be able to confirm, we're working on a timeline on Thursday for that. So estimations are he's got to review, see how much data we've got sitting in there to start. So the structural data, body condition score, we've actually got quite a lot of data sitting there. It's to try and amalgamate the data because they're in different formats. So we'll hopefully have a little bit of a better picture by next week, the time frame in and around that. Worst case scenario will be early next year.
Okay. And so
the other important thing that we want to ensure is what we do produce to you is reasonably accurate. We can do iterations and extracts, but we've got to make sure that once the test runs are done that they are, relatively accurate. So we'd prefer to do those in-house before we present them to everybody. So,
okay. Yeah. And what's the proposed timeline to canvass the membership as to whether they are liking it or not, or otherwise?
Well, we'd just love to get your feedback straight away, Paul, really. Like, I think
give us the feedback. Yeah.
And when we're talking about communication and whatnot, like it's great if you have an experience that's positive or not positive, or whichever way around it is to make sure you sing out. And the likes of the Helical, if you've got something there that you think that's a good idea of how to load data and it's going to take less time, because that's what we're all lacking, right? We're not sitting at a computer loading data for 5 hours at a time. I can just copied and pasted it out of Excel sheet with my 400-day weights the other day, and it was easy as pie. But there was a little drop-down tool that they needed to go in the date column, so it could be the same date for all of them. They're so open, they fix it in no time. So the more feedback we can get from an experience, the better, Paul, really. So yeah, we'll work a plan about how we try and deliver that feedback, but the more that you guys drive some of that feedback would be absolutely great.
Mike, the structural assessment in Australia is not, it's self-assessed. Are we setting up another range of consultants and costs across New Zealand?
Yeah, well, that's something that obviously we've got to look at, James. Like we've got currently this, I think, just correct me if I'm wrong there, James, but about 15,000 records sitting there that they can access now that have all been independently done. So that's just sitting in our system, so we can just pick that up and establish that EBV. Going forward, well, here's a good forum to ask the question. And do you think it should be done on just an individual stud basis, or do you think it should be done with a supposedly a qualified independent assessor?
I think it should be done by can be done by the breeder, Mike. I mean, we know that they're not all the same. What you're looking at is variation. You're only fooling yourself if you give yours a score of 5 every time. It just doesn't, and you rely upon our integrity for birth weight and growth traits and temperament. This is no different.
Yeah,
that's really good point.
Just to reiterate what the situation was there, James, was ABRI would only historically receive data on structural evaluation from an accredited assessor. So we were restricted to submit that data from an ABRI accredited evaluator. So now that we are in Helical, we have the opportunity to change those rules and regulations in and around to include your individual assessment should the members wish to go that way.
Has anyone else got some feedback on that?
Yeah, and we've still got these concerns, obviously, over we're going to have a body condition score, hip height and everything in New Zealand, but it doesn't correlate to the Australians, and the same with the foot scores. And we've got bulls at the moment, we've got foot scores both in New Zealand and Australia that don't, are unrecognisable as being the same animal. So that's not helping us one little bit. So we've got to get that sorted out.
So the answer to that, David, would be for you to join the World Evaluation for your structural data, because the World Evaluation structural data includes Australia and America. But individually, you can't record the same or compare the same within the same organisations, because it's only Australian data that's put into the Australian system and New Zealand data that would be put into the New Zealand. The World Evaluation would give you an EBV for that structural.
Well, the World Evaluation will be the same as the Australian one.
Beg your pardon?
The World Evaluation will be the same as the Australian one, which is the world one already.
No, you'd have the TACE evaluation, which is Angus, but the World Evaluation, the structural data is combined with that to give you an EBV on those different structural traits. So if you wanted to, and this is the beauty of Helical moving forward, should you wish to in the future want to compare with Australia under or America for an EBV for structure, your data could go into that to give you a comparable EBV.
Well, we do want that, yeah.
Yeah, well, we can do that now that we're in Helical. It's just a cost factor should you, in the future wish to go down that track. Yeah.
It's still evolving, that World Evaluation.
Yeah, exactly, James.
Because currently animals that are in it, that are registered in Australia, they've got to have I think a minimum number of progeny or accuracy to qualify to be in it. And it's not actually got much traction.
Yeah, well,
in
it's
Australia.
Yeah, it's the accuracy of the data, isn't it, and the reference population. So the threshold, I think, for it is at 25%. So don't quote me on that, but I think that's where the threshold sits for some of that information. Yeah.
Anyone else with some questions there?
Well, just this referendum that was taken to the board meeting. I mean, is there any reason not to run that referendum anyway?
Yeah, well, that's what I was just reading out before, David. So where we got to was that a lot of it was around the body condition score and the hip height score, right? And we tried to get that data from Australia, and the answer came back as a no. And so we're establishing it here in New Zealand through Helical and Bolt. And so where we got to with the feedback we got around the table, that we'd put a hold on that, because we've actually been exploring the opportunity with Angus Australia for the last nearly 2 years, off and on, back and forth. And so to really get established with Helical, get these EBVs up and running, which is literally a month and a half away by the sound of it, and then reassess once everyone's had that experience there.
Can I just add to that, Mike? It was my understanding around the table that the biggest cause for bringing the referendums to the table was the supposed lack of communication and the perception from the membership that actually the board were doing nothing as far as talking to Angus Australia, whereas we were constrained in what we could talk about, and into that silence crept the assumption that we weren't talking to them at all. And that was my feeling, and I think that's what the ward chairs and the representatives around the table came to the conclusion, that actually we were already pretty much fulfilling the terms of the referendum anyway, because we had been having active negotiations with Angus Australia during that time. Is that your assessment, Mike?
Yeah, I think that's just what I've been reiterating there, Megan, that we have been discussing with them for quite a period of time now, and that full amalgamation point wasn't really in the benefit of all members right now. And this was certainly aligned on numerous facts there with Angus Australia, and both ways would agree, I'm sure. But just at the moment, I don't think the full amalgamation was really the go. Do we have a referendum and it's, what we can continue going round and round and exploring, and where we left it with Angus Australia, that the door's certainly wide open, like for having conversations. There's certainly no closed doors or any of that sort of carry on. But clearly we've got these EBVs now and the opportunity to get them up and running, get their runs on the board, and Angus Australia weren't in a position to be able to share with us their body condition and their hip height data, unfortunately.
Mike, what did you think that we had to offer Australia?
Well, the bigger the data sets are, the better they are, right? So that's one advantageous point. I mean, we've got a brand that's over 100 years old.
That wouldn't go away.
Not that they were that interested in that. And like clearly the main thing is the data set, right? So yes, we have some infrastructure here that could potentially help them, depending on how they wanted to shape that up. And whether that's actually financially viable would be another question. Because that becomes, diving down into the depths of the final detail of the outcomes of that's a full business appraisal, right? Of how that would flush out. But clearly there's some aspects of PBB that would be helpful for them, and others that they just completely do in-house, right? So, but we didn't get to that level of detail of how those sorts of things would come out.
I can talk a little bit to that. Good evening, everybody. I've been involved in these negotiations over the last 18 months, and an observation I have is what do we bring to the table? We actually bring a lot to the table, and that probably was one of the things that was not recognised at all. I think in the short term, have no doubt there are some big challenges in Angus Australia. We had some pretty candid discussions. I'm not going to talk about the details, but they have so many of the same challenges that we've had. Faction groups, it's a large group, and it's a very here's the rules and people play by them. And they've got a New Zealand problem in the short term. Now, I think all of us in this call here can see in the short term, there's some real advantages in us joining with them. It solves, our EBVs, the challenge of two different EBV measures in our New Zealand market. We've got, the perceived split in the Angus breed. And it's actually not economically viable in the short term for Angus Australia to service such a small number of members. So have no doubt they've got a New Zealand problem. Now, the way they're going about it, and quite frankly, we've been pretty upfront and we are honouring the NDA. But, we've been approached by members of Angus Australia that would join us. And so, they've got a short-term challenge commercially. How do they service their New Zealand members? And okay, park that up. I think if we've actually kept the door open, we've approached it professionally. I don't think for a second that the majority, and I think this is where we're at, we should go to a referendum. And if we get, if that's where we decide to go down the track, and if we get 75%, we go and explore that. But I really think the medium and long-term downside of joining Australia for our beef industry would be huge. We're 200 odd members in a 4,000 plus membership, and we've got one seat at a table of 14. And like it or not, they really value our data set. We bring some real grunt to the table around our style of farming. They've been really open about that. And don't think for a second that our relationship with them was frosty. We got pretty close with them. And despite probably what we've now found has been represented in some of the conversations going on, in the recent times with our members. So, we have negotiated in good faith. And I think we're well placed. I think my sense is, give Dan some time with some of these negotiations. I think the fact that we actually have held them back and just sort of said, well, hang on a minute, we bring a bit more to the table than some short-term challenges, some short-term issues. So, I mean, that's a take that, when I look at it with a more strategic look at it, now that's not taking away from some real member issues, and I hear them. I hear David. I hear I think you were well represented. The Canterbury ward and the Marlborough ward, and we had a really good discussion with the chairs. It was the best, arguably the best open forum, and these two Zoom meetings. I'd like to bring this in quarterly. Where we just have a forum of kicking it around because. But we looked at that. So what I'm saying is, taking away, there are some challenges that we need to solve, for our members that are looking, across the Tasman, and there are some challenges. I mean, there's no reason we can't collaborate more closely with Angus Pro. I've always sort of said, I came into this association after that sort of split, or right on that. It's been a good thing. It's created different discussions. It's made us all lift our game and look over the fence. But I also think this is a pattern. Part of me goes, I was looking at the police commissioner on the news last night where they're trying to pinch our cops. They pinch our teachers. They pinch our doctors. They pinch our nurses. This is a pattern here as well. Why do they do that? Like Mike said, we punch above our weight and we do bring value to the table. And I think losing autonomy, I'm not saying that shouldn't be. If our members want to go there, we're a member organisation. But I sort of, when you balance your fiduciary duty as a director in the best interest of the association, I think we got to the point where in the medium long term, there was no value placed on what we could bring beyond a transaction. So, yeah, I'll throw that on the table just to sort of probably lift the horizon a wee bit.
Thanks, Kendall. It's just a good perspective looking a bit longer term there. Has anyone got any further questions?
I do think we have to solve some of these challenges that are raised, and I think we're committed to that. Don't get me wrong there. But I don't think we need to give everything away for that.
Yeah, and like I say, having one seat at the table, Kendall, doesn't put you in good stead to try and influence anything, across there, and probably nor could you expect to if you're 200 out of 4,000. Okay, right. We might wrap things up there, team. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Really appreciate it. It's great to have the good questions coming in, and look forward to our next occasion when we can have another Zoom catch up as well. So I wish everyone a good night. Thank you very much, Lisa, for facilitating. Really appreciate you staying late tonight.
No worries.
So really appreciate your help there.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
good night,
Mike.
everybody.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.